of the squads. I think I've done Australia 70s, then Australia 80s, and now this is Australia 80s B. Because of the amount of players that Australia used in the 1980s, I had to put so many players in. Like I said, I've done over 1,000 players that played Test cricket in history. So a lot of these are included in there too. So, and people's favourite players are there. My goal was always to do like many tournaments, but it took me a good 2 years to do this. What, 2018 maybe to 2019? Yeah, a year. It took me a year to do it. Great fun, and I wrote about it on Planet Cricket as Mouse of Dread. So you'll see it on there underneath Cricket Academy. I probably could turn into a book down the amount of stuff I put in there. Anyway, my goal was to put it online as well. I was going to do it on PowerPoint. That took too long because I've already done the work. So I just thought, well, I'll just speak over what I've done. So here we go. So this is Australia 1980s B-side. So we'll crack on. And I'll start off with some players that, well, some are well known still, despite the fact I put them in the B-side. And like I said, some of these players do cross over into the 90s or the 70s. But I've put them in the decade I think is most appropriate, as I don't want them to appear in two squads. So here we go. So I'll start with Kepler Wessels. Kepler Wessels played for South Africa and Australia. For Test cricket for both teams. Was a rebel and was reinstated. So he's had a curious career, but he started out being an aggressive bowled batsman, and many people don't know, but actually played in the Kerry Packer era as well. As a very young, talented young batsman. He wasn't well known then. But he did play in the Kerry Packer World Series cricket as well, so he was hardened as a South African. Then he played for cricket for Australia as a decent opening batsman during the time when Australia's team was not strong. However, I believe by the 90s, when with South Africa readmitted, in fact before that, he joined the Rebel squads, the Rebel tours, as I'm right, I think to play for Australia against South Africa, where he was actually born, if I've got that right. But by the late 80s, there were signs that South Africa were going to be readmitted. So then he switched again, and then he went back to play for South Africa, only briefly then, because he was an older man then. But tough competitor, Kepler Wessels. I think he's even got that trait built in. Let's have a look. Yeah, Test expert, leading light. A great fitness because he had a long career, so he can play pace, strong focus. He's good at the cut shot. Yeah, there you go. You got Stephen B. Smith, because there's another Steve Smith, and I'm not talking about Steve Smith that plays for cricket now. There's another Stephen Smith, talented batsman from the 90s. I remember being a teenager by this point, and in the 80s, when Australia came to the West Indies. I think it was 84, 85. And Steve Smith was touted as a really outstanding batsman, but like many batsmen of that era, playing against the West Indies, they had no chance. But he was a good batsman. Simon O'Donnell was a very good all-rounder. I think recovered from cancer at one point, bless him. And was a good medium bowler, a good player to have in a bits and pieces game. Probably would do really well if he played T20 in his era, the short version of the game. The medium version of the game, One Day Internationals, he was perfect. Excellent. I think it was a 1987 World Cup winner as well. Good player. Peter Faulkner I don't know too much about, to be completely honest. Other than to say, clearly here he is an all-rounder, right, medium, fast. Same with Greg Shippard, fast bowler, not fast bowler, sorry, batsman. I think he was one of the Rebels. Same with Michael Taylor. I don't know much about him again, other than he was a decent bowler, batsman. Again, could have been one of the Rebels, but I'm not 100% sure. Mike Haseman, on the other hand, I do know about. Mike Haseman definitely was a Rebel. Played in the 1980s for Australia, but was definitely a Rebel. I.e., he did not play for the national side as much as he should have, because he became an Australian Rebel. I believe he was an opening back. And a good catcher. See, position 1 bonus. It was a good catcher of the ball. So that's means he's going to be in the slips. Mike Whitney played in some mid-80s Australian test touring teams. Again, I think he was part of the 87 World Cup. Tom Hogan played late 80s cricket from what I can understand, remember. But he was a good bowler, batsman. Sort of an all-rounder, tough competitor. Peter Taylor was a left-handed, let's have a look, an off-spinner, left-handed batsman. I do remember him from the mid-80s playing against England in the Ashes. Now, Andrew Hilditch, I definitely remember, was an opening bat. Later on, became a really outstanding selector for Australian cricket and administrator. Really good. In the 80s, I remember him playing in the 1985 Ashes, I want to say. He played decent. Just remember Hilditch. I think he played in 81 as well. Rod McCurdy was a fast bowler that probably should have achieved a lot more. Became a rebel. Trevor Hons, again, another player that didn't hit the peak he should have, but as an administrator, he was superb. Another one of those ones that developed into, I think it was a selector or some sort of senior administrator within Australian cricket. So by the 1990s, when Australia was dominant, it was people like Hilditch and Hons, I believe, if I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, that did really well. Bob Holland had a silver-haired bowler that had some good moments against the West Indies, if I remember correctly, in the mid-1980s. Same as Murray Bennett. For some reason, they go together. They had a good season against the West Indies internationally. Roger Woolley, I'm not sure again who this is. Didn't know too much about him other than I picked his stats up. I know he's a decent player. Greg Campbell was a very fast bowler with the mullet. I can't do a mullet on here, but he definitely had a mullet, I know that. Decent bowler. Simon Davis, again, another bits and pieces, but you can see these are B players because I don't know too much about them, other than I've read about them. Martin Kent I do know. I'm sure Martin Kent came to the West Indies at some point, but I do remember him, or he definitely played in 1981 Ashes, which is a famous Ashes series for Australia main players coming to the end of their careers, being 1-0 up, both of them looking an absolute down and out for England, lost the captaincy, and then somehow just turned that into what's called Botham's Ashes, which he lived on for the rest of his career, still does. John Maguire was a medium fast bowler. Mike Valletta, decent batsman. Robbie Kerr had a brief flash in the pan opening bat. Decent player. All of these are decent players. They just weren't the level, as you can see by the stats, of the 70s players. And they were just backups, mostly, except for someone like Kepler Wessels. Greg Dyer was a decent keeper. Chris Matthews, decent left fast bowler. So, if you were making, say, for example, a mid-80s Ashes squad, you'd find a lot of these would fill out your squads. You'd find them here. But the standout for me, personally, would be Kepler Wessels on here. He could easily get into the A-team for the 1980s. I just happened to balance it out with this particular team because they had a weakness. Lineups, just to see the lineup. Kepler Wessels, Hilditch, Kerr, Smith, Kent, Valletta, Woolley, O'Donnell. Yeah. So I have assigned it correctly. Or as best you can. You do your own lineup if you want. Uniform, standard. Yeah. Just realised I never showed you the lineup for Australia A for the 80s. Jeff Swampy Marsh, David Boone could open, so I put him there. Wessels probably should be there. Kim Hughes, Dean Jones, AB, Graham Yallop, Bruce Yardley, Steve Rickson, Terry Alderman, Mark Hughes, Craig McDermott. That team would give anyone a fight, and the reserves are strong. Okay, so that's me done with that one. So that's Australia A, B. Australia B done. I was just showing you that. So if you like the video, please press a like or a subscribe. I'll keep doing these regardless because it's almost like a memento to myself for what I did over those years. So one day I might look back at YouTube and say, look what I did during the pandemic or before the pandemic and after the pandemic. So I'll stop the broadcast there.